Hi there, welcome to Ancestral Recall. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan. Today's story is going to look at the third set in Tempest Block, Exodus. Why listen to my stories? Because my stories are best stories. I want to start today with a little discussion of third sets. Historically, third sets are small and don't get drafted a lot in comparison with the second set, let alone the first set. In fact, in terms of draft, for every third set opened in a block and draft, 3 or so second set packs are opened. Financially, this makes a big difference, as fewer cards are opened and thus chase rares in these sets are particularly valuable, despite having less total playtime in Standard. In retrospect, during this time period, a lot of cards seem much more powerful in third sets than first or second sets in my perspective. Maybe not that much, but certainly to a slightly stronger degree. This is what it is. Wizards knows that these cards are going to be around less in Standard, so that means there's less time for blatantly powerful effects to warp the format. Since Mirage codified the block system, Exodus was an exemplar of a third set. It had lots of very powerful cards, it shook up formats, both Standard and Type 1. Exodus also did one other thing that no other set had done before. It designated rarity with the expansion symbol. Now these days, almost everyone takes it for granted. But back in the day, knowing what was rare and what wasn't was a giant pain in the rear end. People used to drag around magazines like Scry or Inquest to make sure that they were able to check the rarities. And yes, they used them as price guides. Oh, well, I hated Inquest magazine. The humor was pretty awful. Exodus recounts the escape of the Weatherlight crew to their ship as they try to exit the plane of Rath. Basically what they're trying to do, this is a whole set devoted to running away from the Vorpal Rabbit in Holy Grail. They do make it to the portal, spoilers, and enter the mysterious plane of, it turns out to be Mercadian Masks, but we don't know that until after Saga Block is finished. Welcome to our new reoccurring segment, The Price is Right. Not Nate Price, although he's pretty right most of the time. What cards are valuable in Exodus? As of the taping of this show, here's the top 5 cards. City of Traders, $60. Survival of the Fittest, $30. Recurring Nightmare, $13. Cataclysm is $8, and finally Mind Over Matter, also $8. Exodus had a ton of staple cards that were powerful enough to get reprinted in core sets over and over again, yet were fair. Things like Soul Warden, Merfolk Looter, Reclaim, Wood Elves. If something gets printed again and again, that's a pretty good sign that it was a well-designed card. Exodus has a bunch of these. Okay, let's get into the individual cards. Limited resources. Okay, this is banned in Commander and for very good reason. This card just should not exist in any format with more than 2 players. And I don't even like it in 2-player formats. I really want to know what this card does. This is something that intrigues me. I guess it's a good idea to look at the card text. Oh. I bet Niv Mizzet would appreciate this. Check it out. Cataclysm is the fixed balance. 1 land, 1 artifact, 1 enchantment, and 1 creature for each player shall survive. All other permanents shall die. Incidentally, this card does fit later flavor because no planeswalker shall survive the Cataclysm. Paladin Unvec is our first double protection knight. This guy was a mainstay in Standard for quite a while. It got printed in quite a few core sets. Soul Warden is an essential component in lots of modern decks, such as Soul Sisters and any number of life decks, and this is where it first saw print. It's been in Standard in one form or other ever since. Equilibrium. Okay, even without abusing 1/8/7 abilities, this card is broken because it gives all your guys an additional unsummon for just 1 small mana. That is gigantic tempo advantage. Definitely an underestimated card. Urtai Wizard Adept, the first counterspell on the stick. He got worse later on. Forbid. Okay, good lord, what were they thinking? Counterspell with buyback? This was a key component of Randy Buehler's Buehler Blue deck. This World Championship gold-bordered precon was a deck that I cut my teeth on to learn how to play Control. Forbid was amazing. ignoring card advantage for game advantage. Carnophage is the second 1-mana bear for black printed after Sarcomancy. These cards were critical in the black aggro deck. I wonder if there was some kind of card that could help this archetype. Oh yeah, Hatred. Unless something horribly goes wrong, as long as you're ahead in life, have an unblocked attacker, and can pay for this, you win. This is Channel Fireball in a single card. Costs 5 mana though, so I guess it's fair. Recurring Nightmare, oh man. This card was partnered with Survival of the Fittest to power out ginormous guys and brutal combos. The potential for abuse with creatures with come into play effects, enter the battlefield effects, is endless. If I ever write for Wizards again, I know I will use the entering battlefield of convention. I know that is the style, but these are my videos, and when I'm talking about old school stuff, I get to use old school terminology. Slaughter. Okay, buyback Dark Banishing. Instead of mana, you just pay for life. I like this card for cubes. It makes for tough decisions, and with EDH, you have 40 starting life, so that's a cushion to get 1 or 2 or 3 uses off of this. If your commander table has way too many +1/+1 counters on it, teach them a lesson. With Spike Cannibal, your friends will curse you for it, but you'll feel smart. Keeper of the Flame used to be stronger until they took mana burn out of Magic. Having the ability to lower your life at will actually mattered with cards like Keeper of the Flame. It's symmetrical, but if you want to find a different alternative to giving all your guys haste, there's always Pandemonium. Price of Progress is a staple in Legacy and Vintage burn decks. Ow, have mercy. I mean, this card is utterly brutal. Wow, so much damage for 2 mana. Insane. Seismic Assault, yet another combo engine. Okay, it has very harsh color requirements, but the Swans of Bryn Argol combo works really well. Rather than talk about this card, I'm just going to play his intro music.
From the age of exploration, the namer of nations, Il Cartographer! He making the map. He taking no crap.
Oath of Druids. Yeah, this card's really fair. You can use Forbidden Orchard from Kamigawa to give them a 1/1 spirit token, and then on your upkeep, you can oath out Progenitus, or Emrakul, or any other number of patently ridiculous giant fatties without paying for it. There's a very good reason this is banned in Legacy. Just for the sake of completion, let's take a look at the other oaths. Oath of Mages is outright horrible. Just don't even bother reading it. It isn't worth your time. Oath of Lieges is actually a pretty sweet card in Commander if you have some kind of effect that you can sacrifice lands to, such as Zuranorb. It fixes your mana, and it can thin your deck well. Oath of Ghouls will probably be oversold cemetery for everyone in multiplayer, and doesn't require the 4 dead guy threshold, so if you want to be a table favorite, this is a good card. Oath of Scholars effect, giving people 3 new draws every turn so long as someone has more, would be a lot more abusable in Eternal formats, if not for the fact that it costs 4 mana. But in multiplayer games, if you're playing with lots of cheap stuff, go crazy. Remember, the Oath cycle targets an opponent, so it can be shut down with Witchbane Orb or Leyline of Sanctity. If you have Witchbane Orb or Leyline of Sanctity in a 2-player game, your opponent doesn't get a chance to use those oaths. Survival of the Fittest. I already talked about this card last time with Volrath's Shapeshifter, but on its own, it's an insane combo engine, and with the aid of Squee, Goblin Nabob, it's giant card advantage. It's dirt cheap, only 2 mana. The key difference between this guy and Fauna Shaman is huge, because you get to do it multiple times a turn, and it's much harder to remove. What's the final verdict? This set's incredibly powerful and chock-loaded with all sorts of broken engines, which got exploited to insane levels with Urza's Saga. There are a large number of iconic effects, such as looting, which got viable, in fairly printed forms. And then there's the brutal power of buyback. Shadow doesn't get played much in Legacy or EDH, both formats that have high power quotients. But reusable effects do, So I think buyback, when we look at Tempest Block as a whole, is the much more relevant mechanic over time. The nature of Forbid, take a look at it. It turns 2 cards in your hand into a counterspell, and as long as you can manipulate the game to be drawing 2 cards a turn, that works fine. You can counter every spell that your opponent plays, or just counter the ones that you think are a big deal. You don't need to have 4/4s with upside to make powerful sets. And yes, this set's creatures took a backseat to the spells and non-creature permanents. That's what's changed with contemporary design. Take a look at Baneslayer Angel. Exodus isn't where Magic is now, but that's okay. It's a classic set from a different era that stood out in different ways. It was an elegant ending to a classic block, so I'm going to give Exodus a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching today. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe. Please like this video, and don't be afraid to leave a comment. Also, don't forget you can go back and check out my older videos too. You can follow me on Twitter, add me on Facebook, and find me on Magic Online as Turbo Eli. This is Ancestral Recall signing off. Good games, and good luck.